Hello and welcome to our third session of our fashion illustration series. In this session, we will learn how to draw various poses in different angles and how we can add various garment details and different garments to these poses. Firstly, we will look at how can we select the best pose. The pose you choose for your fashion illustration should show off the garment to the best advantage. Some movement of the figure is desirable. However, if you add too much movement to your fashion figure such as running, walking or jumping, it would distract from the main garment itself. So, you should choose a pose that would show off your garment but would not distract away from the garment. The S pose you choose is good for showing a little bit of the front and also a little bit of the back of the garment. Whenever you choose a pose that is lifting a leg, it helps in showing the fullness of the trouser or the skirt that you are trying to show in your fashion illustration. Now, in this session, we will learn how to draw these kind of poses in different ways. Now, the first thing while drawing a fashion figure or a fashion illustration, at least in the beginning stages, is to always use a reference image. This is to understand the body and the movement of the body. While choosing the reference image, we have to always keep in mind that it has to be a good quality reference image with no blurred pixels in it. The figure should not be wearing a lot of clothes or a lot of fullness in the clothes. This will help you understand the actual shape of the body without distracting from it. Always remember the lighting in the picture should be good in order for you to get a good view of the fashion figure. Now, once you have chosen your reference image to draw, now we will look at how we can analyze this reference image in order to draw a final fashion figure. Now, you can either analyze it by placing a tracing sheet over the image or you could do it directly. For this session, I will analyze the image directly for your reference. Now, while analyzing the reference image, always take a tracing sheet to place it over your reference image in order to stop it from getting spoiled. Now, while analyze it, the first step you do is to draw the center of gravity or the center of balance of the figure. Now, what is the center of gravity? The center of gravity line will be a line from the middle of the neck to the leg in which the weight of the body is. Now, if the weight of the body is balanced between the legs, it will be at the center of both the legs. However, if the weight of the body is 30% on the right leg and 70% on your left leg, your center of gravity line would be 70% towards the leg on which more weight is on. So, once you have drawn your center of gravity line, we will now draw the center front line of the face and the center front line of the torso. Center front line is the line at the center of the model. So, now since the model is a little bit curved while she is standing, even her center front line will become a little bit curved. So, your center front line will go from the center of the entire image. So, your center front line is drawn. Now, the next step is to see the direction of the neck, the direction of the head and the position of the eyes, lips and nose. Now, since she is tilting a bit, the direction of the neck will be a slight tilted position. Even her head is in a slight 3/4 position and is slightly tilted downwards. So, we will draw that as well. And since her head is tilted downwards, the eyes, the nose and the lips will be facing downwards. Now, you will go ahead and trace the angle of the shoulder, angle of the bust line, angle of the waistline and the angle of the hip line. So, the angle of the shoulder is slightly tilted downwards. So, we are just tracing the angle of the shoulder. We will also mark the shoulder joints on either hands. The angle of the bust is also tilting slightly downwards. So, the bust line will also be tilting downwards. Now, if you notice, the angle of the waist and the angle of the hip is tilting upwards in the opposite direction. So, while drawing that, we will draw the waist and the hip tilting upward in the opposite direction. Now, you have gotten the basic torso position of your fashion figure. Now, we have to now analyze the position of your hands and the position of the leg. We can see that the leg at the behind is completely straight and is going inwards. So, we will draw the direction of the inward leg in that position, whereas the leg in front is slightly bent in front of the leg that is behind. So, we will draw it over here. This is the knee level and it is going slightly bent. The direction of the feet both are at 3/4 view. So, we will mark both at 3/4 view. One is slightly tilted upwards and one is where the weight of the body is. Now, the direction of the hands, one is lying completely straight and here is the elbow level, here is the wrist level and here is the direction of your fingers, and whereas the hand at the behind of the figure is slightly bent. So, we will mark that as well. Now, once we have traced and drawn all these lines, we have now successfully analyzed our reference image. If you notice, if you join the angles of the shoulders, waistline and the hip line, you will now get a basic mechanical figure that we have learnt in our previous sessions. Now, once you have finished tracing this out, we will now go to our final sheet and start drawing or redrawing the mechanical figure that we have traced on our tracing sheet to our final sheet of paper. So, first you draw your center of gravity line, then you mark your 10 heads from 1 to 10. You reproduce the head in the direction of the head you had traced in your tracing sheet. Draw the angles of the shoulder, bust, waist and hip lines. The direction of the shoulder, like we saw, is slightly tilted downwards. The direction of the bust is also tilted downwards, whereas the waist and the hip is tilted upwards. So, we will draw the waistline slightly upward and the hip line also slightly upward. And now finish off your basic torso block. Now, our next step will be to draw the direction of the neck. Now, the neck is slightly inward, so we will mark the direction of the neck. Then you can go ahead and draw the direction of the hands and the direction of the legs. We will take the midpoint, draw the arm joint, and then like we see, the front hand is more or less a straight hand. So, we will draw that, whereas your back hand is slightly bent. So, we will draw that as well. Your crotch level is over here. Your panty line will come somewhere over here. Your leg at the behind will come inwards towards the towards the center of gravity, and your leg in front will have a slight bend. Now the bend will be a little above 6.25 since it is bending. So we will take that position a little bit above 6.25 and then mark that. Position of the elbows, position of the wrist and position of the fingers. Now we have transferred the entire mechanical figure onto our main sheet of drawing. Now once you have your mechanical figure ready, you can just follow the steps of fleshing out that we learnt in our previous sessions to finish the fashion illustration in your desired pose. Now we will learn how we can sketch basic silhouettes and garments on our fashion figure. So we will follow the same steps that we learnt in our earlier sessions to flesh out the mechanical figure. That we draw for fashion can be either drawn out flat as if laid on a surface, or we can draw it as a three-dimensional garment as it would look when somebody would wear the garment. While drawing garments as they would look when worn, we need to create the illusion of three dimension on a two-dimensional sheet of paper. So always remember and notice the direction of light that your fashion illustration will have. This is in order to understand your direction of shadows and your direction of highlights on your fashion figure. Now let's look at the basic garment shapes. The basic idea of a fashion illustration, you're basically covering various cylinders of a fashion figure. If you're drawing a neckline, you're covering the cylinder shape of neck. Whereas if you're drawing a sleeve, you're covering the cylinder shape of a hand. If you're drawing a trouser, you're covering a cylinder shape of the leg. So this is the basic concept you have to remember while drawing a fashion figure. So once you understand this concept, we will begin to sketch out different garments on your fashion figure. Now there are four basic steps we have to remember while sketching out the garments. Firstly, you draw your basic figure in the pose that you would like to show it in. Now over the figure, you will start drawing the garment silhouette showing the fullness and fit. Tilt the shoulder line and the waistline according to the hemline of the garment. Then you will start adding various garment details such as pockets, cuffs, seam lines, fastenings. We can also go ahead and show some fabric folds and creases where the body moves and hence the fabric moves as well. Now you can complete the drawing by erasing your guidelines and adding finishing touches such as shading, detailed works, showing the fabric texture and patterns of the fabrics. Let's look at how we can draw various garment components like your neckline, sleeves, etc. Firstly, let's look at how we can draw a neckline on a fashion figure. The neckline is basically a curve around the cylinder of the neck and it goes over the shoulder. So your front view would show the front shaping only, whereas your 3/4 view would show a little bit of your front and a little bit of your back as well. For this session, I will show you how to draw a boat neckline on a fashion figure. If you notice, the boat neckline is more or less like a horizontal line over the shoulder area, and then it curves onto your shoulders as it goes towards the back of your figure. So we will try to get this kind of curves over our shoulder on our fashion illustration as well. So firstly, you can draw a basic sketch of the fashion figure you would like to draw. So we will go ahead and have that curve on each shoulder that we talked about, and then go ahead and have more or less like a horizontal curve to show the boat neckline. Now we will go ahead and add our sleeve details. We can go ahead and add a slight shadow for the back of the boat neckline. We can add a certain amount of folds to show the 3D-ness of the fabric. Remember, the folds will always be in the direction of the body shape under the fabric. We can go ahead and add our collarbone. Add slight shadow detailing under the bust. Slight shadows over the shoulders. Finish off your seam line for the sleeve. And there you have it, a boat neckline is ready. Let's look at how we can draw different kinds of collars and lapels on your fashion illustration. When we draw a collar, there are 3 basic features that we have to remember: the neck edge, the outer edge, and the connecting line between the two. This line is known as the fall of your collar. Now start off by drawing the back of each collar following the curve of the neckline. Then we go ahead and draw the lapels that are usually the same on either side of the center front. Now usually one lapel overlaps over the other lapel. The buttons always sit on your center front line, and you have to draw the buttons following the curves of the center front line as well. In this session, I will show you how to draw a Peter Pan collar. Now, like we did earlier, we will first draw the basic shape of your fashion figure, and then we will go ahead and draw the Peter Pan collar. We will start off by drawing this curve. Now it's quite a high neck Peter Pan collar, so we'll go ahead and first draw the curve to show us the direction, and then we will go ahead and draw the curve of the fall of the collar. Now we have finished drawing the collar. Now remember, like we discussed, there will be a fold over the center front line to show the overlap of the fabrics. So we will have to try and get that fold over as well. So there will be one overlap of the fabric, and then the other side will fall under the overlap. So it will fall slightly under, and then we will go ahead and draw the buttons. Now we will go ahead and start adding the detailings of shadings on the fashion figure. There will be a slight shading under the collar to show the depth. There will be shading under the buttons. Remember to show your button holes as well, that will be opposite. There will be shading over the overlap, shading under the arm. There will be shading wherever you have drawn. And that's your Peter Pan collar. Now let's look at drawing various sleeves and cuffs. Now when you draw a sleeve, you have to remember you're basically covering just the cylinder shape of the arm. So when you draw a sleeve, it is best to draw a folded arm in order to show the fullness or flare of the sleeve. If the sleeve end has a cuff or a fastening, be sure to draw those rounded edges of the cuffs and the fastening. I will show you in this session how we can draw a bishop sleeve. Now if you notice, the bishop sleeve has a cuff at the end of the sleeve, and then it flares out during the arms of the fashion figure. So we have to show the fullness at the arms and the stiffness at the cuffs of the sleeve. So we will go ahead and now draw the basic figure of our fashion figure. If the sleeve has a lot of fullness, try to show the fullness with a folded arm so that your viewer understands how much of the fullness is there on the sleeve of the garment. So we will first start off by drawing the neckline of the garment. We will draw the seam line of the sleeves, and now we will start flaring out the bishop sleeve. Now once you have added the fullness, we can go ahead and draw the cuff of the bishop sleeve. Now remember, whenever you are drawing the cuff, we have to show the roundness of the cuff wherever it touches your actual arm. The second arm is more or less hidden, so we will not draw that as much. Now once you've drawn the basic shape, we will go ahead and start shading it out. Remember to show shadow areas wherever the fabric is folding. The cuff has a few buttons, so we'll go ahead and draw that as well. There'll be a slight shadow under the sleeve, shadow where the garment folds over. And there you have it, a bishop sleeve. Now let's look at how we can draw various kinds of skirts and pants on our fashion figure. Now when we draw a skirt or a pant, we have to remember the waistlines and the hemlines of the skirts are usually a curve down in front and a curve up on the sides. However, if the pelvic area of the fashion figure is facing upwards, then it would be the opposite. It will be a curve up in the front and a curve down on the sides. Now, the skirt or the trouser silhouette is determined by the shape of the garment itself. You have to look at the hemlines, the length of the garment, and then after you analyze the garment itself, then start adding it onto your fashion illustration. Now, the drape of the fabric is indicated with the outline you draw of the fabric. If it is a thicker fabric, it will have thicker outlines or fatter curves, whereas if it is a thinner, lower weight fabric, it will have thinner curves or thinner outlines. Now, when we draw the movements and folds of the garment, we have to keep in mind the position of the knee and the position of the hip and the legs. So, it's always recommended to first draw your entire legs and then start adding on your trousers and your skirts in order to get the best shape of your trousers and skirts. Now, once you achieve the shape of your skirt and trousers, erase off your guidelines to finish off your skirts and your trousers. Now, let's look at how we can draw various gathers and pleats on a fashion figure. Now, gathers are usually drawn by showing tiny folds or creases near the stitch line of the garment. These become fewer and more widespread as they fan out towards the hem of the garment. The hemline of a gathered skirt moves in and out in large columns and is drawn using an undulating up and down line. Some of the larger hem folds link up with the gathers that you have drawn near the stitch line of the skirt. Regardless of the silhouette, the greater the depth and the number of undulations shown on the hemline, the fuller the skirt appears. Pleats are similar to gathers, but instead of rounded folds, they are pressed flat and are sharp, hence creating zigzag effect over the hemline. The in and out movement is shown by up and down lines drawn along the hemline of the garment. Draw the basic skirt shape with curved hemlines and then add vertical lines to show the pleats. Link these with diagonal lines at the hem to represent the backward movement of the folded fabric. Remember, always add shading of shadows in order to show the depth of your pleated or your gathered skirt. I will now show you how to draw a box pleated skirt for your fashion illustration. Now remember, when you draw a box pleated skirt, the pleats always start from the stitch line on the waist and then fan out towards the hem of the garment. The thing about a box pleat or any pleated skirt that we draw, we have to always finish off with up and down lines at the bottom like we see over here, and whichever area is going inside, we have to always finish it off with a certain kind of shading to give it a depth in the garment. So now we will go ahead and draw the pleated skirt. While drawing the pleated skirt, we will first draw the basic shape of our fashion figure. We will draw the basic shape of our fashion figure and direction of the legs, and then we will go ahead and start drawing our pleated skirt. Now if the skirt starts somewhere over here, we will first have the belt of the skirt, that is this area of the skirt. Remember, always finish off your curves with a curve around the body in order to give it that 3D effect. We have drawn the belt. Now we will start drawing the pleats in the direction of the garment. Now remember, when you are drawing the pleats, it will fall however the shape of the body is, because it will take the shape of the model. And then we will start off by drawing the pleats of the garment. Now we have drawn the basic shape of the pleats. We will erase out the excess lines, and then we will start finishing it off with a certain kind of details. Now let's look at adding ruffles and frills for your garment. Ruffles and frills may have gathers at the sewn edge or may sit flat. In either case, they are drawn in a similar way to the gathered skirt we had shown how to draw earlier. Start off by drawing the gathers at the top and then finish off by adding fullness at the hem of the ruffles and frills. Now let's look at how we can show drapes and cowls on your fashion illustration. The folds of the drapery fall from the point of support and then fan outwards. The outer edge of the folded fabric and the draped lines show the radiations of these folds. Allow your lines to taper off as the folds thin out. I will now show you how to draw a cowl top for your fashion illustration. Now remember, while learning how to draw cowls and drapes, you have to remember to shade or capture the shadows of the cowls. The drapes form the cowl of the garment. So we capture that and then we capture the essence of the cowl. So now we will go ahead and draw the basic figure like always. Then we will start off by drawing the upper portion, and then we will draw this area of the cowl. And then remember, wherever there is a cowl, there is a fold. So a cowl is basically different folds gathered together. So we will start capturing each fold. Now if you notice, there are basically just two folds in this cowl. So we just have to get the essence of two basic folds. So there you have it. We have finished the basic cowls on this garment. And so now we have done the various garment details. We learned how to make a boat neckline, we learned how to make a Peter Pan collar, we learned how to make a bishop sleeve, we learned how to make a pleated skirt, a bell flared sleeve, and how to incorporate a cowl in a top. So, these are a few garment details we learned how to make.